本当の僕を知らない奴に何を言われても構わないけど君を傷つける全ては許さない Just keep comes alive decide
Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again for another anime review. For this anime review, I'll be covering the first 2 episodes of Blue Exorcist Season 3. And as we start to move into the first episode, this first episode, of course, takes place in the manga as well, which is really good. And in this particular episode, we have Rin Okamura going out of his way to help a student from basically stop seeing, I think they're called temptates or godolins. And whilst we're here, he of course gets a message from Johann Faust / Mephistopheles or Mephisto / Samael, and he learns that he's also Samael, who's also a demon in this world. And of course he already knows that Rin is the son of Satan in the story. Whilst this is occurring, Rin is basically in the process of making a new friend at the time, and one of the things that he has sort of like offered in helping this friend is sort of like finding a cure so he's no longer troubled or disturbed by these particular invisible demonic type entities which he sees. So due to this happening, Mephisto gets word of it, invites Rin up to his office, to which they end up having a bit of a meal, and then they are finally moved into a discussion as to how he will get a hold of these particular drops so his friend is able to not have any problem with having these particular invisible demonic entities interfering with him and his schoolwork. So whilst Mephisto basically reunites Rin with the many of his cram school members that he used to attend in his early Exorcist training, we end up catching up with Koneko, Izumo, Ryuji, and many others that are connected to that particular, and they are given a task in a way involving things that are happening around the school, and this will sort of like continue the narrative, also what's happening I think in the next upcoming episode, which I'll be reviewing. Oh, I missed something as well a little bit earlier in the story, to which we do have Rin catch up with Yukio, to which Yukio ended up also catching up with the character of Shuro, who plays an important part for Rin and his training with the sword within the story. And of course Rin notices that Yukio is like withholding some important information back as to what's happening with the True Cross Academy, and also not just the True Cross Academy but also what the True Cross within the story is actually doing throughout the city in this world, as they're trying to help the citizens in regards to like how many of the demon spirits are sort of like affecting places and affecting people, and of course with them sending out exorcists to help deal with those issues. So upon completion of the task that the cram school group along with Rin Okamura was given, Rin is then able to give the eye drops to the friend that he made in his class, and of course he's asked in relation to his demonic tail, and he wondered at first if he was seeing things, when he realized, then Rin explains to him that he's part demon and that he's not afraid to sort of like show it out because of the friends that he's made, including the new one that he's made in the beginner's Exorcist class. So as this continues, we do end up seeing something else take place within this particular episode for episode 1, and that is something that is occurring within Yemen, to which we see what the demons are doing in this universe. We end up reuniting with the character of Lewin Light, and I believe it's his, I don't think it's his subordinate, but basically his mentor of sorts. So now we move on to episode 2. As we start to move into the first 5 minutes of episode 2, we end up encountering a situation which centers around the character of Yukio Okamura, as he is invited to somewhat a bit of a secret meeting of sorts, to which we see Lewin Light, Shura, and a couple of others which aren't known to the audience, let alone sometimes to the reader. And we realize that during this interview of sorts that he's asked to give his personal opinion and thoughts on certain situations, and because of that, they also view his twin brother as basically vulgar, and they do not like him that much. There is also another character by the name of Arthur Angel, of sorts, sort of like the sort of like a take on Archangel within the story, until of course Yukio returns to the True Cross boys dorm. More coming after this. So after Yukio returns to the dorm, he has to then head out and then catch up with Shimi, to which with Shimi he's also helping her with some of her studies and her online courses that she's a part of within the True Cross Academy. Whilst this is occurring, we do get some flashbacks between not only Shimi but also with Yukio. With Shimi, her flashback consists of sort of like connecting the how she ended up encountering Yukio, and with Yukio's flashbacks, we got to see quite a bit in regards to his past with Fujimoto, who was basically his adoptive father of sorts, or surrogate father of sorts, and also some of his interactions between Mephisto, and also trying to learn whose side Mephisto is actually on, whether he sides with the demons or whether he sides with the humans. So it's certainly setting up the adversarial or the rival teams of sorts within the story. And the next part, we will probably, as I start to move into the next part, we'll see the return of Rin Okamura. So as we return back to the cram school, as to what is happening there, there is now a bit of a mission for the cram school students, to which involves, the male students as well as the female students, and this involves going into the dorms of the female restrooms of sorts. And of course, with this, the cram school members are requested to help, but in the process, I really like what's being done here, to which we have Yukio saying that the people who will sort of like lead this operation will be Kamiki, or Izumo, as well as Shimi, who also play a part in like freeing up the area of a certain spirit or demon of sorts that is causing trouble in the area because of what is happening between Asaya and Gehenna. So with the story continuing with Izumo and Kamiki, and Shimi, they do end up defeating the spirit that is, in a way, or the evil spirit that is causing trouble within the girls' restroom in the girls' dorm. And not long after that, we have the appearance of the rest of the cram school turning up, getting changed, and yes, they are dressed up as young ladies. Which also brings on a bit of a laugh for the characters who are taking care of that situation. And I must admit, the next thing we move into the place of Russia within the story, to which we get to see a lot of coal tars, and a lot of what we're seeing here does also take place in the manga. So what we see of the events that are taking place in Russia in the story, we encounter, or we do see the return of the characters of Mephisto, who is helping out there. We learn that there's a bit of a Gehenna gate that has been made by human technology or man-made technology. And when you see this Gehenna gate of sorts, it reminds you of the Collider in its appearance. Not so much in the manga. In the manga, it's a little bit different in its appearance, where in the animation, it does sort of remind you of this particular Collider, to which we also see Shura being present at the scene, Arthur Angel being present at the scene, and also finally being brought up within the story, the group known as the Illuminati. This is also a bit of a concept that was taken over in the first season, but at least this time we get to sort of like fully see this be properly set out as the writer and the story creator Kazukato intends, and not how it's sort of seen in season 2, but how it will actually play out in season 3. So with that being the end of the first 2 episodes, now it's time to move into my afterthoughts in relation to these this series. And I must admit, it's really nice to see the cast of characters return to the anime scene again. I have sort of missed them, and I know I've read quite a bit of the manga, and I do actually have some manga here, which volumes 23 onwards that I need to catch up with. Now, if I remember, I think this story takes place between volumes, I think it's 10 onwards. So I think it starts to take place in volumes, I think it's 10 to about 15 within the manga. I might be incorrect there, but I do remember reading through this story and also looking forward to, of course, how they would bring it out on screen. I think some of the highlights of these 2 episodes is some of the stuff that's actually mainly that's happening in the school with what we see of the growth of the characters. One thing I definitely want to point out is that I think with the first episode, it was a really good choice because we got to see the character of Koneko actually shine in the role of leadership. And I must admit, it really shows that, okay, for the character that sort of like comes off as maybe the youngest, smallest nerd in the group, when you get to see him sort of like take position and take place of the leader within the situation, like for the first episode, he really does shine. And it's sort of like, where have you been hiding this? With the character. And he even like speaks some truth in regards to, say, each of the character that's a part of the cram school. He addresses Shimi, Uzumo, even Ryuji. He even puts some of the other characters on the spot, including Tenko. Now, in regards to Tenko, he's one character who I do feel will need a little bit more spotlight within the series, because his character reminds me a little bit like Al, but for the series of Blue Exorcist. And yes, you do see him like having a hand puppet of sorts, which he uses. But that's not to say that the character isn't smart. He is actually quite smart once you do get to read more and learn more about the character. Yes, he will eventually get... hopefully we will get to see more interaction with the character in this season. And I really hope I'm around to give a review of the whole season in regards to just some personal events that are happening at home. But keep that out of it. Moving directly into the second episode, to which we get to see Yukio basically being brought to a bit of a higher place in the ranking, or I guess we get to see some of the higher ranks that are at Blue Cross Academy, and also some of the things that they play a part of. Now, we do learn where he's actually at. They hold a high disregard to demons and also how they've affected the world. And that's like totally understandable. And you'll get to see that play out a little bit more throughout the story and also throughout the season. But in the process, we do get a bit of a flashback of sort, or with some of the flashbacks, mainly having to do with Yukio's eye and how it sort of like connects to the underworld, as that was sort of like brought in last season. And there's also like a little bit of a connection to the first season as well with that too. And he's sort of trying to learn and understand where this actually comes from. Like, is this a positive flame or is this a negative flame? He has no idea at the present time within the story. So jumping into the next thing, and that is the area of the rating of the main characters. So the key main characters in this story would have to be Rin, of course, and Yukio, because they're twin brothers. And we have to understand that Blue Exorcist, even though we do get a lot of centering on Yukio, on Rin, it's not just centered on Rin, on what Rin does, it's also centered on what Yukio does. So we're getting two viewpoints within this story. So we got to understand that with these characters, that we're seeing it from their viewpoints, as well as how the story is approached. So for these first particular episodes, I give the characters an 8 out of 10 as to how well it kept towards the manga. Moving into the area of the supporting characters, to which are basically the members of the cram school, as well as Mephisto and some of the other new characters that we see in this season. Some of these characters do actually have a carryover from the previous seasons, whether it's the first season or the second. For that, I give a 8 out of 10. Moving into the next thing, and that is the area of the animation. I really enjoyed what they did animation-wise with this story, and it's still consistent with the story within the Blue Exorcist manga as well as the Blue Exorcist anime. For that, I give an 8 out of 10. For the soundtrack, I must admit I do quite like the intro for what has been introduced for this particular season. The outro, I think it might be a little while before I get used to it. So for the soundtrack, I will give it a 7.5 out of 10. The animation, I think I just gave before an 8 out of 10. Moving into the area of the rating of the story for the first 2 episodes, I give an 8 out of 10. Until then, let's keep it colorful and have yourself an awesome day.
本当の僕を知らない奴に何を言われても構わないけど君を傷つける全ては許さない Just keep them alive Decide 離れてる to say You're sad 止まらない距離感と日々 Get try 絶対誰かが描いた君顔探したってそれはいないもうだいぶ心はもう思い通り動かないとも他の人と違うとこも近頃は扱い慣れてきた頃本当の僕を知らない奴に何を言われても構わないけど間違えた時さえ